Well, what happens if you get run over by a truck in the parking lot of the bank? You're going there to get the money out of the LLC account. If you don't have some succession planning around it, then there you go. There's an asset that now the family has to go through probate on. So my client, Doug, and I were going through the consultation and design process, setting up his trust. And Doug is a small business owner, and actually it's not so small. It's pretty successful. It's verging on what you might call a medium-sized business, but he's the sole owner. Doug's whole plan, everything that he's about, is all of it going to his 3 kids. And we've gone through some of the other assets and specific distributions and those sorts of things. And I got to the business. I said, all right, so you want the kids to have the business? He said, oh, God, no. So what do you mean? He goes, none of them have ever worked in the business. And don't get me wrong, I love them, but they'd blow it up. That business would go under within the first year. So I want them to benefit from them, but they do not need to be making any decisions over there. And I thought this was a great conversation, because one of the remarkable things, and one of the things I love about trust planning so much, is it's really good at separating benefit from decision making, meaning that you can choose who gets to benefit from something without letting them be in charge of it. Looking back at the episodes of the podcast, I've never talked about business succession. And I've got a lot of clients who have small to medium-sized businesses, and we talk about business succession a lot. And I work really closely with another attorney who specializes in business to make sure we get it right. So today I'm going to talk about business succession planning and what are some things you should keep in mind as you're approaching it. And just to let you know that it is okay. That's my dream anyway. This podcast, even though I'm an attorney of 30 plus years, is not legal advice. I'm qualified to give legal advice, but let me tell you when legal advice happens. Legal advice happens only when you're in a room alone with an attorney, or with whoever you want to be there because it's your meeting. But when you're in a room with an attorney who's listening to you, who you're paying to give you an opinion about your situation, you're getting beyond that initial question you ask where the attorney says it depends. And she gets to start asking you about the details upon which that answer depends. All estate plans depend on what's going on in your family and the law in your particular state. What we talk about here in the podcast is great information. I hope you find it educational. I hope you find it entertaining, but it is not legal advice. It is merely for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes. So, having taken care of that, let's get back to business succession. What Doug was worried about is what I talk with a lot of clients about, is that I've got this business, Doug says, but I don't want the kids driving it in a ditch because I've worked really hard on it. I'm proud of it. And it's created value for my family. It's paid me and helped me pay for my kids' college and help pay for the house and all that kind of thing. And I want them to continue to get benefit from it. So business succession planning and regular succession planning, that's what we'll call estate planning. Estate planning is regular old personal succession planning. When you die, who gets your stuff? Same thing with business. When you die or become disabled, what happens with that business? Now, in a situation like Doug's, where he's the sole owner, there's a wide range. Doug has a business that has inventory and employees and a lot of moving pieces. You may just have an LLC that you created when you retired so you could do some consulting. That's still a business. You don't have any inventory. You don't have any employees. But I would suggest that you've still actually got some value in that business, even though you say, oh, no, that money goes in the LLC account and it just comes out here. Well, what happens if you get run over by a truck in the parking lot of the bank? You're going there to get the money out of the LLC account. If you don't have some succession planning around it, then there you go. There's an asset that now the family has to go through probate on. Trust planning has an edge over will planning where business interests are concerned every day of the week. And it's that businesses, well, your business's business is your business's business, and it's not anybody else's business. You follow that, right? There's a lot of information in businesses that is not for public consumption. It's the kind of thing that you may only tell folks when they're prospective buyers. You may only tell the bank when you're trying to get a loan, but it's nobody else's business. If you have a will plan and you own a business, all your assets are, as we've discussed many times, public record over at the probate court. And so this is not usually desirable for a business. So this is one real edge that trust planning has. So most of my business clients, when it comes to handling the business, we're talking about doing that, conveying that business interest through a living trust, whether it's a revocable or irrevocable trust, depending on the needs of the client, but not through the will, because it better keeps confidential information confidential. That's the thing. It's an asset. It's like any of your other property. When we're talking about personal estate planning, we're talking about your bank accounts, your investment accounts, your retirement accounts, the house, your real estate, maybe it's a vacation home. It's also your ownership in that business, whether it's stock or membership interest in an LLC, that's part of your property. And you can convey it through a trust, just like you can any of the other property. When there's a single ownership, like Doug's situation, and like many of my other clients, simply conveying that ownership interest to the trustee while you're still alive, you remain in control because you're the trustee, and then leaving it in control of the trustee when you pass away allows a situation where there's no gap in authority of the person who owns the business. So if decisions need to be made, your successor trustee is going to be able to make those decisions. And in Doug's case, he's not going to let the kids who don't know anything about the business be in that position. So we're planning so that none of those decisions are made by folks who don't have any of the business acumen. And when I said earlier that trusts do an especially good job of separating benefit from decision-making, that was what I was talking about, is that you can have a situation where the business is being run by a trustee and the profits get divided among those three kids without them having any say in how those profits are generated. And that may be the best thing for the health of the business. This also comes into play where a situation where one of the three kids maybe, or two of the three kids, but not all of the kids, have worked in the business and they know what's going on in the business. And then you've got a child that doesn't have any idea. So again, you want to make sure that those decisions that are made by folks that have the business acumen. Even if you want the son who's off pursuing an acting career in Hollywood and has never worked in the business, even though you may want him to have the profits, you don't have to put him in charge of how the restaurant runs or how the assembly line runs at the business. And that's for the good of everyone. So that with single owner businesses, very often the personal estate planning conveys the property interest and can also do some work on who's got control over the business. There's another way to handle the transition of businesses, and that is through the business documents themselves. The formation documents, the articles of incorporation or the articles of formation for an LLC, and or bylaws and operating agreements. Operating agreements, bylaws, formation documents can lay out classes of ownership, whether it's a corporation and its stock or whether it's ownership of an LLC, and what different classes of ownership, what right they have in the different classes to have a say over the operation of the business, to participate in profits, to make any decisions at all, can be outlined within those documents. This can be especially important when you've got multiple owners of a business. And some of my clients may have an ownership interest in a company that's a minority share where they're not making any decisions. They've been investors. They're receiving profits proportional to their investment, and that just continues on and they don't have any decision making. That's more on the simpler side. We can just convey that property to kids. But if there's an active role in the business, that's where you want to make sure that what you're doing with estate planning is consistent with the operating agreements and buy-sell agreements and bylaws. Hey, Jim Miskell here. Sorry to interrupt the episode.
Hope you're enjoying today's content. A lot of times when folks are thinking about this kind of thing, questions spring to mind. If you have questions, we like to do some question and answer episodes. So you can go to our website, letstalkestateplanning.com, and shoot us a message and say, hey, on the podcast, I'd like Jim to cover this on the next question and answer session. Or if it's hitting closer home, especially if you're a Georgia resident, of course, we can't give legal advice on the podcast because it's not specific for your situation. But if you got a situation that you need to handle, it's important to get that done. So let's talk estateplanning.com is how to contact the office. I'd love to talk with you about the specifics of your situation and make sure your estate plan is everything that your family should have it be. In the meantime, we're going to go back to the episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Very often when I ask clients, all right, tell me about the operating agreements, I get a glassy look back. What operating agreement? What? Oh, I think we've got that. Oh, there's a binder somewhere, that kind of thing. And this is not because they're not attentive to details. This is because the details that they're attentive to are running and building that business and making it better and really creating a legacy of quality in that business. And the administrative stuff is not very interesting to people that start businesses. And so it doesn't get as much attention as sometimes it might need. So part of our investigation when we're going through this with clients is to make sure that we've got those documents, the formation documents and any operating agreements. Buy-sell agreements, you may have heard these talked about. So this is a way to do business succession with a document that's part of the corporate or company structure. And this is an agreement between the owners of the business as to what happens when one of them becomes disabled, whether it's merely disabled or they die. And very often you'll find that these buy-sell agreements are funded with insurance. And what do I mean by this? I mean that you may have 2 or 3 people that start a business and they are very happy being in business with each other and they've known each other for years and they have an intimate understanding of what the business is about, what the goals are, and what the future of this business is going to be. Sometimes there's resistance to document that because they say, well, look, the 3 of us, the 2 of us, we know exactly what we're doing. We don't have to write any of that stuff down. I do a lot of counseling with clients at this moment to say, this is like a marriage. This is like a prenup with a marriage or a postnup with a marriage. This is a situation where you guys have an understanding. And maybe I'm not so worried about the people, and maybe you shouldn't be so worried about the people whose eyes you're looking into right now. But when these transitions occur, those may not be the people sitting across the table. Because what if your partner has gone before you or gone at the same time, and now it's the 3rd husband she's had, and this guy's a jerk. And she's sick in the hospital, and all he's trying to do is squeeze as much money out of the business as he can. He doesn't care about the quality. He doesn't care about the legacy. He doesn't care about what you've worked so hard with blood, sweat, and tears with your partner to build. That's why it's so important to get those initial understandings documented so that when there are folks that were not privy to all that goes into those, all the goodwill, all the conversations, all the understandings about what the objectives are here, when there are other people involved that weren't privy to all that stuff, there are guardrails to keep it on track. So even though it seems like, well, we don't have to do that with each other because we've got an understanding, it's true. I'm not worried about you guys. I'm worried about the next tier or beyond that. So buy-sell agreements. When somebody becomes ill or disabled or has died, buy-sell agreements you'll find very often funded by insurance contracts. And the insurance contracts are there so that the business can buy out the family of the disabled partner so that their family gets benefit of all the blood, sweat, and tears that they've put into the business without having new people at the table in the business trying to make decisions that may not be on track with what is going on in the business. So it's a way to keep things running smoothly at the business and still honor the work that the deceased partner has done. So you're getting the impression, I hope, that there are multiple levels of succession that can be addressed, both inside the business and outside the business. Single owner businesses, a little bit more straightforward, and that's kind of intuitive. Multiple owner businesses may be more complicated. It depends. What's the decision making inside the business? Just as trust can separate benefit from decision making, operating agreements, shareholder agreements can do that as well. So if you're a business owner and you're doing estate planning, I would suggest to you that there's two parts to this. Well, two areas to pay attention to. And one is that succession within the business, and the other is the succession in your personal estate planning to make sure that they dovetail, that they match up, and that they're not in conflict. That's why I work regularly with the same business attorney who's very talented and has a high level of proficiency and it's the attorney that I use for my own business. When I acquired another practice several years ago, that's who represented me. So as that there are two parts to this, you should make sure that who you're working with is being attentive. And I would recommend, especially if you have a business, to get good legal consultation and advice in doing your succession planning, both personal and business, and make sure that they've got some experience and they're asking you questions about what's happening inside the business as well as what's happening outside of the business. What's the character of the business? And how do you envision things going after you pass away? How do you want it to be? So that you can make those decisions and distinctions between benefit and decision making. So thanks for being a part of this brief conversation today about succession planning when it comes to businesses. Just like with regular estate planning, it doesn't have to look like anybody else's. Whatever suits you and your business and your hopes and dreams and needs, you can set that up. But as we age, as we become disabled, decisions are going to get made, and they can be yours or somebody else's. Estate planning, you've heard me say it before, is making sure that those decisions are yours and that they reflect your values and what your hopes for your business's future and for your family's future are. If you're in the state of Georgia and this has made you interested in talking more about what you've got set up and making sure that it's adjusted for the future that you want your family and your business to have, go to our website, letstalkestateplanning.com, just the same as the podcast, letstalkestateplanning.com. You'll find a lot of good general information there about estate planning, a big history of blogs, the podcast you can find there as well if there's an episode you're looking for. But most importantly, if it's time to have a consultation, you can contact the office and we'll set you up an appointment. And I look forward to talking to you about your concerns and sorting them out so that things go the way you want them to, not just the way chance would dictate. I'm Jim Miskell. This is Let's Talk Estate Planning, and I really appreciate your time today, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.